organization founded in 1957, which works to cultivate a respectful view of non-human animals, free living and domestic. Adita graduated from Queens College, carrying with a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature and Urban Studies, and is also a graduate of the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. Her background in advocacy and organizing for animal rights also includes pertaining to the environment and various social justice causes. Without further ado, I present Adita, and also I made brownies. So.
Hopefully you all didn't come just for the brownies, but I know that was a very good incentive. So thank you everyone for coming and taking your lunch hour to listen to me and hopefully learn something from what I have to offer, and I'll learn from what you have to offer. So I actually watched the video of the first presenter you had, and that was, I think the title was Agitating for Social Change, and I thought that was great, and that was I think the follow-up from my talk makes a lot of sense because, you know, any social justice movement has to have a media aspect to really kind of blow up and get attention. So first I wanted to, I know we're kind of starting late, but I thought it would be good to just, for everyone to quickly go around the room if they'd like, just give their name and like the most important thing they hope to get out of this, of my talk and what I have to offer, or what you most hope to learn for your advocacy or for your career after you graduate. So,
no pressure. No pressure. I'm Rachel, and I hope to get, I don't know, any types of inspiration.
Great. Okay.
Sorry, I'm Pamela. I'm interested to know how to get media into numbers.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, I'm Jose, and I'm just really interested in organizing and advocacy and agitating, so I'm here for that.
I'm Dory, and I do the Carlos answer.
My name is Diana, and from this workshop, I would like to see your experience and advice about when to use the media and also maybe when not to use it.
Okay.
I'm Shoshana, and I guess I would also say Pamela said.
I'm Katie, and yeah, just try to get the message out effectively to a lot of people.
I'm Rachel, and I'm interested in whatever you're going to suggest.
Well, that makes it easy for me. Okay.
And Sarah, ditto everything everybody said.
I'm Caitlin, and yeah, I just want to learn how to use media in a strategic way instead of just, making random Facebook posts.
Right.
Hi, Louise.
My name is Simone, same thing.
Hi, I'm Shama, and I heard about the brownies.
She's the only honest person in the room.
I'm just kidding. I'm pretty much here the same reason why everyone else is here.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Thurva, and pretty much the same thing.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I guess I'm here for a lot of reasons, but including what everybody else has said. Also, I would like to know how media's inaccurate coverage of the social change movement could negatively impact.
I'm Jamira. Just to learn something new and also how to, I guess, properly use media. When's the right time of identifying that right, the pivotal moments.
Well, I'm Joe. I'm just here to sort of like pop off my media strategy knowledge.
Great.
I'm Jessica. Pretty much the same thing as we said so far.
Okay, great. Just gives me a good idea of how to. Oh.
I'm Mary. I'm actually an undergrad student. I'm in Go Care. I'm here to represent the Child Welfare Organizing Project for an internship.
Very cool. Has anyone ever heard of a cognitive scientist named George Lakoff? He's actually teaches cognitive science and linguistics at UC Berkeley, and he's written a lot of books, and is this one in particular that I strongly urge, if you get nothing out of this talk, it's to go out and buy this book. You can get it, I think Val found it on Amazon, very cheap, and even though it was written to come out in time for the 2004 elections, it was written as the essential guide for progressives. And it's all about how to frame your issue and how to frame the debate. And for any social justice movement or cause that you're working on, that is really the most important thing for how you reach out to the media, how you project your issue, how are you framing your debate. And I'd like to start off with everyone with a little exercise that George Lakoff says he does at the beginning of every of his UC Berkeley cognitive science classes. So here's the exercise. So I want everyone in the room to do what I ask right now, which is don't think of an elephant. Okay, so let that marinate. So who here was able to successfully not think of an elephant? What? Right now. Oh, like right now.
But
Right.
not immediately after you.
Okay, right. So, just like what George Lakoff says, every time he introduces that exercise, everyone fails. No one is able to not think of an elephant because his whole theory behind this, I'm just going to look at some of my cheat sheets because I wanted to kind of read a little bit of what he says that I think is very important to start off with. Cognitive science, which he teaches and writes about, shows that people think in frames. So you can't not think of an elephant once I've projected that because the word elephant evokes a frame. It evokes an image, specific knowledge about that image, you know, a big floppy ears, a trunk. People associate elephants with the circus or with Africa, certain places. So it doesn't matter if you put a not or a don't in front of it. You can't help it because the way your brain works, you're going to think of an elephant. So how that informs advocates and in your media coverage is that you have to be aware that when you can't just negate a frame that's already been established because you're actually helping your opponent. You have to create your own frame. And part of what he talks about in this is how progressives can kind of counter. It's just very fascinating read, and it doesn't matter that it was written in 2004. It's 100% timely for today, more than ever, actually. He talks about how, how is it possible that the conservative movement in the past 40 years has managed to kind of take over the debate and frame the issues in such a way that they get a significant portion of the American public to vote against their best interests. And he says that it's not enough. One of the mistakes progressives and maybe social advocates also make is that in believing that in just presenting the facts to people, that that's enough to get them on your side. But what his theories support is that that's just not true because of the way our brains work and the way that the framing is sort of ingested by you. So how this, I would give a great example that he gives, like in how, sort of what not to do in when you're projecting your message, and this is general for whatever your message is, because usually whatever you're all in School of Social Work, so you're going to be working on social justice issues. Usually you're going up against big opponents, whether it's government that is shutting down social services. You're going up against a lot. So, and oftentimes you're going to be working in situations like I am where you don't have a lot of resources. So it's very important how you're framing your message. So he gives an example of how the first day when Bush was in office, he started using the term tax relief. It wasn't used before that. And think about that, how effective that was. When you think of the framing of the word relief, if you have the word relief, there has to be an affliction and an afflicted party and a reliever who moves the affliction and is therefore a hero. And if people try to stop the hero, those people are villains for trying to prevent the relief. And then when you add the word tax to relief, you have a very powerful metaphor. Taxation is an affliction. And the person who takes it away is a hero, and anyone who tries to stop him is a bad guy. So that's a perfect example of a frame. It's made up of ideas like affliction and hero, and the language that evokes the frame comes out of the White House, and it goes into press releases, goes into every radio station, every TV station, every newspaper, and soon the New York Times is using tax relief, and soon the Democrats are using it. And once they do that, they are shooting themselves and their party in the foot, because it's self-defeating. you already lost the battle, so to speak, when you accept your opponent's frame, because you are then not proactive, you're reactive. So that's what framing is all about. It's about getting language that fits your worldview and the cause that you're supporting. And it's not just language, the ideas are primary, and the language carries those ideas and evokes those ideas. And I don't think I can talk about successful media strategies without talking about the Occupy Wall Street movement that's going on, and I know from Val that a lot of people have been active in that here. So just by a show of hands, who here thinks that Occupy Wall Street as a general movement has been successful in what they've projected to the media? So I would say the majority of people. There's some people that think that they're not successful. Does anyone who thinks that they haven't been particularly successful want to give a reason why?
Opponents are using the catchphrase 99%.
So you're saying they're kind of using the frame that Occupy Wall Street created against them.
Yeah.
And do you think they're effective in doing
I mean, I think a lot of the media coverage did the movement damage, but based on what you just said, I don't think there was
Great. Well, because, I think that even if you think that maybe the media coverage wasn't particularly positive about Occupy Wall Street, I think that they were very successful in getting attention. They got worldwide attention. They inspired occupations across the country and across the world even. So how they did this, I think, was by framing things in a unique, very interesting way to the media, and that wasn't by accident. This was all thought out, of course. Yeah.
I also think they connected. They had people who weren't even interested in talking about this and saying, resident. They may not agree with everything, but it's bullshit that 1% of the population has all this stuff, and I'm going, especially if during a very particularly difficult time in our country economically.
Yes, exactly. I think that's one of the most important things in whatever campaign you're working on is joining forces, finding your allies, forming coalitions, because if you care about a cause and if you want to make a change in the world, there are going to be other people that are on your side, and when you join forces with them, there is a reason. There's power in numbers. That's a cliche, but it's very true. So I think the way, just the catchphrase, "We are the 99%," I think that is a proactive message as opposed to a reactive, which would be like you could say down with the 1% or fight the 1%, but that is automatically putting them in like a reactive position. But by saying we are the 99%, like that's a few words, but I think it really embodies a lot. And I think what they did was not, which the media kind of was like, oh, well, that was one of the criticisms. Well, they don't have a list of demands, or they did things differently. So that's what was exciting about it. They didn't come and say, we demand that Obama does this or that. It was just sort of almost like a moral movement. Like they're presenting a different worldview that's based on what the 99% of our democracy demands, which is social justice. So it was like there were tentacles for all these different groups, and the unions got on board, and everyone saw that even though each group and individual involved might not agree on everything, and it'd be hard to find any group of advocates that agree on everything, they were coming together for this common cause and saying, we are the 99%. And the target of Wall Street, although I know originally the idea was to actually occupy on Wall Street, but that wasn't allowed to happen, but still, choosing the financial sector is kind of the root of the problem that leads to, money and elections and all that. So they were going to, you can go to, when you advocate or fight for anything, you can choose to strike at the branches or the root. Sometimes if you strike at the branches, like the symptoms of the disease, that might be a little easier in a way, but when you strike at the root, I think you have a lot more power, and in doing that, they were going to the root of it, the root of the injustice, the root of the social injustice, and kind of creating a vision of what a more moral, progressive society could be. And I think someone said, like, how do you get media attention? And I think, it depends on maybe what issue you're working on, but generally there's certain things that's going to be attractive to the media, and specifically for TV news media, they want a visual. So Occupy Wall Street had this, something that hadn't really happened before in a very long time. They created their own little community and were occupying this park. So the media was guaranteed to have this very exciting, interesting visual of these people from all walks of life. I know they like to portray it as just a bunch of, hippies or whatever silly things they were saying about people, but anyone who would spend time there knew that there was a diverse range of people there. So Occupy Wall Street created a situation that the media wanted to eat up because it was visually very interesting and exciting. The media cameras could go down there at any time and film people, talk to people. They held marches. They constantly kept it interesting and kept something. They created a situation that could not be ignored, essentially. And whatever issue you're working on, and I happen to work on issues that usually are at the bottom of the barrel in terms of concern by the status quo. In New York, it is very hard to get attention just because you have so much competition. There's stuff going on every single day. There's marches, there's whatever. And, the media has such a short attention span, especially the corporate media, and it's on to the next thing, and a lot of it is sensationalized. So how do you, kind of ingest all of that about how the media works and then use it to inform your advocacy in a way that you feel like you can still have integrity about? So just to talk about some issues that I personally work on, just out of curiosity, does everyone here know about the effort to ban the horse-drawn carriage industry in New York City? Okay, so a few people do. And, what have you heard, or what is your consensus from what you've heard of kind of the media coverage or how it's perceived by the public? Yeah, anyone.
Well, I think, I'm placed in a politician's office, and she's one of the supporters of the bill,
right. Yeah.
State Senator, and she's had people come who, it's interesting to hear the other side, small business owners, I didn't even know that the carriage people had their own association.
Right.
They have their own lobbying organization. They showed up to, even though they know it's useless, they want their message to be gone out and say they went and spoke to her. But that it'll hurt business, that, it's not very high on the totem pole problems, that now as we're trying to improve the business in New York, this is a big part of a tourist attraction. So I'm more always interested in hearing the other side. I'm in favor of the bill, but,
Yeah. Okay, so that's, Dory gave kind of a rundown of everything we've heard since the beginning of the oppositions and the reasons for why this can't happen. And with any issue you're working on, whatever it may be, so it's basically you're creating something out of nothing often, because you may be working on an issue that already has been established, and you're sort of jumping in and getting on board, and there's already allies and a coalition involved or whatever, but sometimes it's going to be a situation where there isn't. You're it, and you're making it happen. So then it's like there's already a frame out there, like I talked about with Reframing. The carriage horse industry, since their inception, has been able to get across kind of, a lot of people, if you do word association, you say horse-drawn carriage, they say, oh, romantic, because that's been fed by the media and movies, that it's romantic. So that's the frame that was established. So when I got into this and we decided to ban it, there had been no effort to actually enact a ban, because we were told over and over again that could never happen in New York City, because the industry, the carriage industry, was too politically connected. They had friends with them, they had a lot of money and power. There was just a long, long history, and we would never ever get it done. So advocates for decades before, since like the 80s, they focused on trying to get better regulations. So the reason we started a coalition to actually just focus on the ban was the animal community sort of rallied around. There was a terrible accident. I don't know if anyone remembers. This was in 2006. It was a rainy night, and a horrible accident happened where a carriage horse spooked out of control and ran into an oncoming minivan. And it got a lot of media coverage. The horse crashed face first into the car, and there was injuries, and the horse actually had to be killed. So it was sort of like one of those sparks where you know what, enough is enough. If this isn't enough, these kind of images, so many people reached out and said, what can we do about this? What can we do? So we said, you know what, that's it. We're starting a campaign that's going to focus strictly on a ban. we're not going to get better regulations. There's no way to make this better. There's no way to make this situation better for the horses. It puts the public at risk. The horses every day suffer, and we know this. So what we had to do was sort of project our own worldview, project our own frames, because the carriage industry had the advantage of creating their own media frames for a very long time and not really having much opposition to it. So, I brought, we didn't even have really any politicians that were on board to get a ban. Actually, Tony Avella, who's the senator now, who has been our biggest ally, and he was the first one to introduce legislation in the city council, and now there's legislation in the state. But when he originally was totally against our plan, for those reasons, he said you can't have it. He had a bill that he proposed to sort of restrict them to the park. And he actually was angry at us, the advocates, who had come together and said, you know what, all you're doing is making this harder. He just wasn't getting it, but what happened, which is rare for a politician, is that he went out on his own. He spent an afternoon really observing the horses and doing the research, and he came to the conclusion, you know what, these advocates are right. There is no way to make this better, and we're going to fight to ban this. So I actually was asked to be the media spokesperson for this coalition we formed. And I had no idea what that meant. I was new at the job I was at Friends of Animals, so I didn't really know what to do. So I kind of had to learn as I went along. Even though Friends of Animals is an organization that's been around a long time, and we're international because we have someone in Canada, we don't have a lot of money compared to a lot of organizations, so it essentially became a grassroots operation. So it's just me in the New York office. We have a headquarters in Connecticut and a couple of other people spread out, but it's a very small organization. So it was really almost like a one-person operation on my end. And then we formed a coalition because that's just more powerful when you have as many allies as you can on your side. So we started creating something out of nothing and putting this idea out there and not just rebutting everything that the carriage industry had said, but also creating our own frames. Like a good example is, the carriage, one of the problems, well, there's a lot of problems. One of the problems are the stables. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the stables where the carriage horses are on the far west side. They're just horrendous. They look like condemned buildings, and they basically are. So the carriage industry would always say, oh, we care about our horses. Just the usual things that anyone who's exploiting anyone is going to say because their profit relies on it. So I started using the term, this goes back to like framing your message. I started using the term warehouse cells to the media to creating my own frame. Like if I would say these aren't stables, these are the warehouse cells that they bring the carriage horses back to every day. And that started catching on. And that was a positive way where I was sort of reframing the idea. And, because people have in their head when they hear stables, it's this happy place where the horses are eating hay, but warehouse cells, I think, creates a very specific image. And I thought that was very fitting for what they are. And it actually worked because it so angered the carriage industry and their spokespeople that at a recent public hearing, it was a community board hearing, where we were testifying in support of the ban, I spoke before one of the spokespeople that actually was a former carriage driver for many years and is a well-known spokesperson for the carriage industry, and I used that term, warehouse cells. And it so angered this woman that when it was her turn to testify, she just reacted and gave this angry tirade about, these crazy activists, they call our stables warehouse cells, and that's not what they are. So I had known in a way that was a victory in kind of reframing and repainting what this is and taking the sheen off of it. And as I said, for the frame that a lot of people will say, it's romantic for carriage horses, I brought kind of an example of what I think was a mistake I made early on. This was one of the first, this was from 2006 when we first began the campaign and really started putting it out to the media and getting attention. And I was very excited because even though it's only Newsday, but it was a cover story, Hold Your Reins, critics say it's time for Hanson calves to go. So this was really a big deal for us because we'd succeeded in the efforts we've done and getting, finding allies, reaching out to the community, going out to the hack line, which is where the carriage horses line up on Fifth Avenue, educating people, getting petition signatures. So we formed a very tight-knit group of advocates, and we were successful in reaching out to the media and getting taken seriously. So this was kind of a big deal to get a cover story, but this was when I was new at being a media spokesperson, and I feel like I cringe when I read the quotes that were printed in here because I feel like it's doing exactly the opposite of what George Lakoff recommends in reframing the issue. So I'll read the quote. It's a decent article overall. Kara does yay or nay. I'll send it around, but my particular quote is, and it's not in you have to read it in context, but I said, if you really care about the horses and you like horses, then you don't want to support this cruel industry. There's enough public safety risks involved in New York City as it is. We don't need this extra one, said Adina Barnekran of the Coalition to Ban Horse-Drawn Carriages, the group that called for the boycott. Quote, the notion of the romantic thing, that's just an illusion, and once you get past that, there's nothing that justifies the cruelty issue. So in a way, I was like reinforcing the romantic thing. And sometimes media journalists will kind of lead you into a trap, and I've fallen into that before, but once you do make that mistake, you won't let it happen again, because unfortunately, a lot of the corporate media and journalists have become lazy in a way, and they kind of just want to cut and paste a story together. They don't really want to do real reporting or investigating, so they kind of have an agenda, and they're going to like bully you into it. But what I learned is that whenever you're fighting for any social justice cause, whether it's for women's rights, for animals' rights, for environmental rights, you have to stick to your points, have talking points, stick to them no matter what. Don't be confident, don't be bullied into, if you see that the reporter has an agenda and spinning it, you don't even have to answer it. They say, oh, but isn't this romantic? Just stick to your point. These horses are exploited every day on the streets, and then they're sent to slaughter. And like, you will force them to kind of, regroup and say, oh, well, I guess I can't frame it as romantic. So I'll just pass this around for everyone. And what I did want to read just quickly, the preface about reframing. And I thought it was very interesting for everyone here because it's titled, Reframing is Social Change. Frames are mental structures that shape the way we see the world. As a result, they shape the goals we seek, the plans we make, the way we act, and what counts as a good or bad outcome of our actions. In politics, our frames shape our social policies and the institutions we form to carry out policies. To change our frames is to change all of this. Reframing is social change. You can't see or hear frames. They are part of what cognitive scientists call the cognitive unconscious, structures in our brains that we cannot consciously access, but we know by their consequences, the way we reason and what counts as common sense. We also know frames through language. All words are defined relative to conceptual frames. When you hear a word, its frame or collection of frames is activated in your brain. Reframing is changing the way the public sees the world. It is changing what counts as common sense. Because language activates frames, new language is required for new frames. Thinking differently requires speaking differently. So, an example of that would be tax relief, how successful the conservatives were in totally reframing that and, even getting the Democrats to use that. I make certain never to use the language when I'm doing media campaigns or press releases, the language of my opponents, which would be, there's an issue in New York City about shelter animals and cats and dogs that are being killed in very large numbers because of the sort of inept way that the shelters are run. So oftentimes the word euthanasia is used incorrectly because euthanasia applies to only sort of a mercy killing when an animal is terminally ill. But oftentimes, people that run the shelters that are killing a lot of animals, they'll say, well, we euthanize. So it's being misappropriated and used in a wrong term. Or for hunting issues, they'll use the word culling or harvesting. So the pro-hunting groups will frame their issue as we're culling or harvesting, sort of these benign words that makes you think of grain. But I'll say, no, it's killing, it's a slaughter, it's not culling or harvesting, so I will be sure to make sure that I reframe that and project what I know is the reality of it, kind of, project my worldview to the media. And like I said, oftentimes you're going to be at a disadvantage in terms of that, you're probably maybe going against what the status quo is, right? That's generally the work of social workers, right? So I was, as a quick exercise, I was going to see if anyone wanted to give an example of an issue they're working on or a campaign and how it could or should be framed, like if you wanted to do a media campaign. Like just any one issue, like maybe a women's shelter being shut down or something. I thought it'd be something, yeah.
campaign I'm working on in my placement is something that's constant is to keep affordable housing, mainly through the issue of SCREE, which I mean everybody knows what SCREE is. It's just this, if you're over 62 or over in the city and you live in a rent, subsidized, controlled, stabilized, although those things are slowly disappearing, and you make less than $29,000 in income, your rent will freeze at that level that you're at, and you just have to reapply every single year as long as you still meet the criteria and I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. And they also have somebody if you're disabled under the same income, but you don't have to do the age, and it's called SCREE, senior exemption rent something. Stabilization more.
So this is in danger of...
It's always in danger. I mean, recently they went before the Supreme Court and tried to, they being the housing lobby, tried to actually remove all rent regulation in the city. They lost, but the fact that they're still fighting, just like we're fighting against, we never thought we'd be fighting, even talking about birth control being an issue. I mean, but how, anyway, to the point, how we're actually framing it now is as a senior issue, because, you know, it's looked at as a housing issue, and we have a mayor and the governor who do not support rent regulation in any capacity. And so, but seniors resonate with politicians on both sides of the aisle because they have political power, they vote. And so if this is seen as a senior issue, SCREE, and we attach it to rent regulation, which is also because the majority of people who are in rent-regulated apartments are senior citizens, then we can also reach out to other coalitions that work with them and start reshaping that. But before, if it's just looked as a rent regulating thing, oh, then they just want freebies or they want whatever the narrative is now, even amongst the quote-unquote Democrats, you know.
Yeah, so exactly, making this a human issue, focusing on the moral aspect.
And a political cloud over turning it into that.
Yeah. So I always think, from my personal advocacy, that you know, focusing on the morality of the issue is the best thing. So I do that. And for me, it's always about, like, you know, the connectedness of everything, how all these issues are really connected, how all social justice issues are connected. And when we fight for one, you know, we're fighting for all. So I thought, has there been any media campaigns with that related to, you know, making that about senior citizens? Like, has there been like demonstrations or press conferences or anything?
Right now, it's in the creation of the coalition stage. You know, through basically the politicians who want to lay, the more progressive politicians want to lay the groundwork amongst the ground troops. You know, the CBOs and the advocacy organizations. So they're having meetings with them and saying, "Listen, you're over here, you're over here. You think you're right? You're all doing the same thing.
Exactly, yeah.
So, but just come under this umbrella, and then you can bring in some of the senior advocacy organizations that don't always, believe it or not, vote or support progressive candidates, as long as they think their stuff is safe."
I know. That's always an issue too. I know there's these
65 or older
PAC groups, and it's like, it's sort of like, I think that's a problem in a lot of progressive causes. It's like short-term thinking and short-term goals instead of long-term thinking. Like, you know, if you're only electing a candidate on this one issue, but how is that, that's not really like a holistic way to look at it, because how is that going to, if this person gets in office and they have other horrible, oppressive views towards women or whatever, environmental issues, then how is that affecting that, you know? So thinking in terms holistically in these issues, how they're all connected. And I understand the you know, the upside of the political action committees, that for your issue, it's like, well, you know, focus on this and the other side has that. But for me personally, like, I could not in good conscience, if someone was in support of the horse carriage ban, but they also were a Tea Party member and they wanted to abolish all social safety nets, I would not vote for them, because I would feel like that would be committing a wrong for society as a whole. So, okay, so you're dealing with something where it's sort of in the development stages, and that is a very big part of it, because you can't really go to the media on any issue and present this to the media and have a campaign until you are very organized and focused. Have a focus. That is the most important thing. I actually went to, last summer, it was kind of it was a conference for advocates and media about the cat and dog shelter issue, again, as I mentioned before. And there was actually someone there. It was kind of a media workshop, so to speak. And there was a reporter there who, from San Francisco, who specifically wrote about dog and cat issues. And her whole point of being there was to kind of like help us like get better media attention. And one thing she said is that because press releases are very important. She said that the big mistake that she's seen from a lot of animal advocates, and I'm sure this is probably for every social justice cause, is that there's not a focus. Like, she'll get a long press release that goes in, it's like a diatribe from the Unabomber or something, like goes into every issue imaginable, and it's like, and I understand that impulse, because it's like, you're so desperate, like you care about your cause so much, you want to get this across, you want to tell this person, please cover this issue, this is why, so the impulse is to like get everything in there and tell them exactly why, but that's a mistake, because you have to realize what you're up against. This reporter could have 1,000 emails in their inbox. They're going to look at the subject line and maybe the first paragraph, and if that is not concise, and if she said say exactly what you want within the first couple of paragraphs, exactly what you want. What is this? The who, what is this about? Who are you? What do you want? What do you want from us, basically? So I gave some examples I was going to have Val pass out of press releases that I've written that I felt were very successful in getting media attention, because I feel like especially if you're kind of creating a new frame and it's an issue that has not been in the public consciousness, like you really are the ambassador and the advocate for that cause. So everything you put out there to the media is extremely important, and everything you say. So this is about, I don't know if, I assume most of you are New York City residents, but for the past few years there's been a plan that Mayor Bloomberg has enacted to kind of round up and slaughter all of the Canada geese in the city parks. That's been ongoing, and when we found out about this a few summers ago, of course I mobilized and I said, well, this has to stop, because it's not even just about the Canada geese in particular, it's about the injustice of our tax dollars going towards rounding up these beautiful creatures and gassing them to death. And in public parks, the reason we have public parks and what our taxpayers' dollars go for is they're supposed to be sanctuaries for city dwellers to go and enjoy nature and connect with nature as much as we can, right? So the fact that this was happening and the reasonings were just irrational that were being given. Does everyone remember when the plane in the Hudson went down, right? So that was a freak accident, and we actually found out that that plane had like engine trouble, but it was very convenient to blame it on the fact that some geese had struck that plane. So then Mayor Bloomberg went on this media blitz saying, literally like, it's us with the geese. So that was a great, like, he portrayed it, he framed it as, these geese are a threat to our lives and we have to kill them all. Meanwhile, the reality was that the geese that had struck that plane were migrating geese, which are a different species than the geese that you see in the parks around lakes. Those are resident geese, meaning they don't migrate, they don't even fly high enough to migrate. So what was happening here was the mayor was totally lying to everyone, and effectively, because a lot of people supported the idea because they thought it was a danger. So we had to get together and find a way to counter this. And what we did was something, we did form, it was a community-based effort, because in 2010, Prospect Park, which has a lake, the community was really outraged, and it got a lot of media attention because basically overnight, in the middle of the night, the USDA, which is the U.S. Department of Agriculture, came in with like 100 agents and they rounded up and stuffed them into crates, including the babies that were just born. All of the geese in the lake, which were like 400 geese. So they were gone. People went to the park the next day and it was empty. There was just feathers around, these little plastic ties. So this was a very brutal, violent thing, and they gassed them to death. So the Brooklyn community was outraged and like heartbroken, because a lot of people that went to the park every day, like they observed these geese, they'd seen them, they're babies, and Canada geese, if no one knows, they have a bad reputation unfairly, but they're very emotionally intelligent creatures. They fiercely protect their young, like fiercely, like if you go near there, the mama and the father will go after you. So just the way they were being portrayed, it was such an injustice we felt, and we knew that it wasn't even about those geese. We wanted to stop this, but this was about a wildlife and nature issue, because we knew if this was able to happen, then next year it would be a different species. Next year it would be the raccoons or another species, or swans, and eventually we'd have parks with no wildlife in them, because that would be easier, because you don't have to clean up goose droppings or whatever. So, but that's not, that doesn't benefit the majority of New Yorkers who do go to parks to observe and interact with nature, and part of nature is wildlife. And if you don't like that, you should not go to the park. So what we did was we said, how are we going to get attention, positive media attention for this? The decks are so stacked against us. We have the mayor, literally he said, if it's the goose or us, I'm going to go for the humans every time. Like, he was portraying it like this ridiculous way that would get, we're like, okay, we're just a group of community people in Brooklyn. I'm from Queens, actually, but we kind of joined forces and we came up with an idea that had never really been done before, and that was to form what we call Goose Watch, because we knew the USDA were going to come in again that following spring and summer. Actually, the phase when they're molting is when the babies, after they're born, their flight feathers have not grown in, so they can't fly away. So that's why the USDA agents come in and stuff them in, because they can't escape, essentially. So we knew we didn't have a lot of time to get like public support. So what we did was we formed. I think that's the press release I gave everyone, right? Let me see. Right. So this is what we had to do in a short amount of time, was to put something together to project to the media that, to first of all gain sympathy for the geese and show that not only are they not a danger, but we're demanding protection and an end to this killing, but not only an end to the killing, but protection and respect for wildlife and policies that preserve them, not slaughter them. So that, the media, first it was the local Brooklyn media that kind of was very interested, because it hadn't been done before, that hey, here's a group just regular people, Brooklyn people, all different kinds of people that are saying, we're going to go into the park and like basically stake it out, and if the USDA comes, we're going to try to stop them from doing this, because it was like, when you feel, everyone felt so powerless that this had happened in their backyard, basically, and they couldn't do anything to stop it. So this was a way to kind of take a proactive approach, and it got a lot of attention because that had never been done before. And I think we were able to get a lot of public support, and actually we succeeded in stopping the roundups from happening again in Prospect Park. And if Val wants to show, can you possibly show the other one first, the goose one? Because part of it was, okay, how are we going to get sympathy for these geese and people realize that they're not these horrible creatures, they're these beautiful. So what I did was I went, I don't think that's it, I went to Prospect Park and filmed some of the babies, they're called goslings, when they were there, and I put something together so I could present to the media to show them.
It's getting busy at Toyota's #1 for everyone sales man. Maybe it's because Toyota's
kind
fuel.
Well, after we started getting media attention, NBC covered it, and the sound is up.
You want to introduce it first, and then I'll just...
Yeah. So this is a reporter from NBC, and NBC picked up on it after the local, that's often how it works. Local media in your community will pick up on it, and then the major networks will, when it gets a buzz. So you just want to get the buzz going. So this was the fight to save the geese, and I think it's just a good example of the result of our work and kind of reframing the issue that, Mayor Bloomberg is misguiding and lying to the public. These geese are not a threat to anyone or to air safety, and the parks exist for species of wildlife to be there so that New Yorkers can enjoy them. And so we got attention kind of because of the Goose Watch, but we had to frame it in a way where this was an ongoing thing. So this will be, Val can show this one out. Get out of the way.
So wildlife officers came to Prospect Park, round up and killed hundreds of Canadian geese. No assault, and animal rights activists were outraged. This summer, those same activists say they are not going to allow another goose killing to happen on protest. Since the extermination of 400 geese last summer, these four crossings have become a rallying cause for Brooklyn environmentalists. Their eggs hatched despite a controversial government campaign to kill Canada geese, whose migratory patterns brought down U.S. Air Flight 1549 of Miracle on the Hudson.
Again, that's actually inaccurate.
Adina Bernkrank is an animal rights activist who is organizing a 24-hour Prospect Park surveillance campaign. She calls it a volunteer goose watch. If USDA goose killers arrive, the volunteers will try to capture and
actual footage of
slaughter on video. Some of them may try to physically prevent it.
I don't know why my quotes are not, I don't know what's wrong with the audio. But
Bloomberg.
Yeah, I think Bloomberg knows. So basically, part of it too was like, again, how do we get media to show up? Why do they give a crap about a few thousand geese being killed in New York City with everything else?
Surveillance shift running in June and July, but they won't be necessary. The numbers of geese are way down on Prospect Park.
So see, they're showing the empty part of Brad Landers account. Yeah, see, the audio is not working for that, but basically.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, at first, it was a little alarming because actually some of what I was quoted as saying, I was like, oh no, should I have done that? I actually said, he kind of led me into it, like, well, aren't you breaking the law? Because technically the parks close at 1 a.m. So anyone who's in the park after 1 a.m. is breaking the law and can be arrested. So I said, well, technically, yes, that's breaking the law, but I personally would be willing to be arrested for that. And I said, the mayor has declared a war on wildlife, and we kept using that term because it's a little cliche, but I felt like it was framing the issue like pitting Bloomberg as the perpetrator of this. And part of what they showed with us with the posters was I organized a demo in front of his mansion, and that actually got a lot of attention. He happened to be there, and he had to come out and kind of scurry into his little SUV, and then he commented to the media. So we found a way creatively and with the help of the community to reframe this issue of, hey, these geese must die because they're disgusting creatures that they're going to eat your children. I mean, you should have seen the ridiculous things that was coming out about how hated these creatures are. And it's like, what? We have so much space, public space in this park. Prospect Park is 600 acres. The idea that we don't have room for a few hundred geese in a public park is insane. They have every right to be there. So we found a way to reframe the issue so that we got sympathy for the geese by showing the footage of the babies. I think was very helpful. We actually got a lot of people to sign up for Goose Watch because of that, because people need visuals. They need to see something that counters the lies they've been told. Visuals are very important, and I think showing up in front of if you can do sometimes street theater, anything that's going to draw the media out there. And they want something that's new and fresh. And that, unfortunately, if anyone's watched the local media, it's pretty depressing because it's like, if it leads, it bleeds. It's all this sensationalistic stuff. So to some degree, you have to conform to that, but you can do it in a way where you're still keeping your integrity and you're not compromising your cause. So I always find ways to do that. I don't think you have to resort to stunts that really kind of degrade your issue, or that my organization doesn't do that. Like there's some other animal organizations that do. Everyone probably knows about PETA. They're known for a lot of things, and they actually describe themselves as media whores. They actually say that, and they're very effective in getting attention because they do these stunts of naked women and stuff. But that's not the tactics my group takes. We just don't do that. Everyone has different tactics. We take a different approach, and we feel like you want to be taken seriously for the issues and not get attention just for the stunts you're doing that have nothing to do with the issue. So I have actually an example of another press release. This was just a kind of a follow-up to that one. It was about the one I put out when we went to Bloomberg's mansion. Oh, wait a second. Okay. All right, we started a little late, but it's kind of, there's so much to talk about. I also have an example of, these are some educational flyers that we created about the carrot horse issue that I think is very important for whatever your cause is. You need to have something that you can give to the public, to the media, to kind of explain your worldview and frame the issue, and everything you put in there is very important. So I don't know if there's time to show. Show the what?
Demonstrators gathered in Center Park to call on the city to outlaw horse-drawn carriages. Animal rights advocates say the horses are being exploited for profit and slaughtered once they can no longer work. They say they rescued a carriage horse from slaughter last week and are looking to save even more.
We can't rescue them all, so we're educating New Yorkers. There's so many other fun, attractive tourist options that they can do that doesn't support animal abuse.
The carriage industry claims they love their horses. They and yet a third of them go to auction where nobody knows what will happen to these horses.
I'm not saying that there's not abused animals somewhere else around the world, but I know for sure we drive the horse and carriage and we take very good care of our horses.
The New York Horse and Carriage Association released a statement saying it doesn't practice or condone the sale of the horses to slaughter. The organization also says 99% of its members work to provide retirement for their horses, both on privately owned property and through the New York Humane Society's Carriage Horse Adoption Program. And it says the owner of the horse saved from slaughter has not paid dues or participated in the association for some time.
Sorry, it's like we're kind of running out of time before, I would like to, but that was just an example, again, of reframing the issue, because we're constantly told that the industry loves their horses and they retire them, but we actually rescue a horse from the slaughter auction, and we kind of use that as ammunition to say, no, you know what, I always get the word exploited out there, and I was very happy, that's why I showed that as an example, that the news reporter was using that language, said these exploited horses. So it's countering in a proactive way what the industry is putting out there. So I think everyone can find ways with whatever issue you're working on and finding the most powerful, proactive language. Just be very focused on your issue. I would like to go into more of actual steps that you take to get media attention, but I gave you examples of the press releases, and I think that's very important. Whatever issue you're working on, you have to do the research to find out what press, what reporters you have to have a press list. So you don't want to just have it like when your event comes or whatever that you're struggling to do that. Be prepared beforehand. Do the research. There are reporters that focus on specific issues, so you want to find out who they are. Have a press list and refine it and make it as big as possible. And try to have relationships. Call up the reporters. Like a lot of people think it's just enough to send out a press release. It's not. You know what? They're people, so you have to kind of reach out to them and, again, be very confident, be the ambassador for your issue because you're it, right? So like every conversation you have with a media person, you want to make it so that they're the ones that will call you on the issue. So I think that by reaching out to them personally, making a phone call. Phone calls are very important, and a lot of times they are accessible, these reporters, and they're happy to hear from people, and that doesn't happen that often because maybe people you can't be meek, or you have to kind of get past, a lot of times people feel like they're too shy or whatever, but if you don't project the issue with confidence, people will pick up on that, and the media will pick up on that. So I think whatever issue you're working on, you're already going to be passionate about, and as long as you keep that passion and stay focused and find out who your allies are, come together, form coalitions, and then really work on the language you put out there. As I said, really, when you put a press release out there, make it as focused and concise as possible. Know what you're asking for. Try to come up with creative ideas.